anybody who wants to watch this. Good evening. Welcome to everybody. I'd like to introduce our speaker for this evening, Dr. Roy Middleman, who gave me a very short bio, so he's obviously a very humble person. He's the director of the Jewish Studies program at the City College of New York. Dr. Middleman received his BA from the University of Pennsylvania and a master's and PhD in religion from Temple University. His research focuses on Muslim-Jewish relations in Morocco. And the topic tonight is the Jews of Morocco. So Dr. Middleman, welcome. And we're so glad to be able to host you tonight.
Thank you for having me. We are a small enough group that I think it would be wonderful if whenever you have a question as we're going along through our time together, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question. I won't be looking at the chat box. So either, Rabbi Singer, if you wanted to be the gatekeeper.
I will.
If you'd like for the questions for the group, or maybe people individually, either way would be terrific, but don't feel you need to stand on ceremony and wait until, I'm done with all the slides. So let's just have fun with this. I'm gonna put up, just to show you not just another pretty New York face, I'm gonna show you I can do a screen share. There it is. I think you folk can see that, right?
Yes.
All right. And how does that look? Can you all see that?
It's a beautiful picture, beautiful.
Well, I always like starting with this photo because I took it in the corner of an old synagogue in a town called Ksar Souk, which is now called El Rashidia, around 1980-ish or so. There were 9 Jews left in town at the time. And for me, there's just this sense of transcendent, almost aching beauty in this photograph. It captures so much of what I love about Moroccan Jewish life. And what I want to do now is add a little bit of sound to it. I want to add sound from Casablanca, 1978, my first trip. I met some little Moroccan Jewish girls, and just listen to what they're singing. Well, I see you all smiling and nodding your heads, so you understand this was both in Hebrew, which we're used to, but it was all, then they started singing in Arabic, and I'm back in my hotel room, 1978, with this little micro cassette recorder, listening to this, and just weeping because it was so beautiful. And then suddenly I realized that there are different ways of being Jewish. It's not just what I saw on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, but also there's a whole nother way of being Jewish. So when did we Jewish folk first arrive in Morocco? Well, the short answer is we don't know. And there are 2 theories afloat. One is that there was a wave of us in 586, of course, before the Common Era, after the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem. And then other historians say, I'm sorry that I sound so much like a professor. This won't last, don't worry. And the other was in 70 of the Common Era, after the destruction of the Second Temple. What we know for sure is where these first folks landed, and that is in the southeast region of the country. In the academic literature, they're referred to as, by the Hebrew word, toshavim, meaning the original settlers. And this is what it looks like. This is how the southeast part of the country looks. I remember, every now and then, when I'm down in Marrakesh, if you look on your weather widget, it usually says sunny or hot or something like that on your iPhone or Android. There have been a number of occasions when I've looked at the widget and it says Marrakesh dusty. I've never seen any other widget anywhere where they say the weather forecast is dusty. But here you see, this is way in the deep south, of course, much further than Marrakesh. And here is Ouarzazate, which is a little bit further west than the first slide. Please, good folk, hold on to this slide in your mind, because you and I are going to cross the field. We're going to walk across the field in a few minutes, and we're going to open up one of the doors in that walled fortress called a Kasbah. And we're going to see how Jews lived until 1967 in the deep south of Morocco. Just so we're literally all on the same geographical page, well, here we have Israel. And we don't know how Jews got from one place to the other. They may have crossed over the Mediterranean or completely by land. What we do know for sure is, and you saw in the photographs, is they landed somewhere right around here. This is I'm calling this the southeast part of the country. What we know for sure, no debate about this, is that the second community that arrived was in 1492 after the Spanish Inquisition. Where do they settle but in Fez? So when we say that Moroccan Jews are Sephardic, well, it's because of these guys, not because of the original indigenous inhabitants, the Toshavim, back 2,000, 2,500 years ago. Did these two groups like one another for a long time? Well, you can guess the answer to that. No. It's one of those typical Jewish stories. There was a lot of tension between them. Now no one knows the difference at all. Everyone doesn't even think about these things. These folk are called Megorashim, those who are expelled or chased out. Hold on, there's no quiz tonight, but do hold on to this map in your brain. Because it'll serve us in good stead in the next few minutes. So here we have Casablanca. When you take a plane, at least from New York City, JFK to Casablanca, it's about 6 hours. So I don't know, add 5 more hours to that from LA, more or less, I would imagine. Most of the Jews have always lived in Casablanca. That's true to this day. If you get the right kind of a driver, you can go from Casablanca to Marrakesh in 3 hours flat. Anything less or anything more, you've got the wrong driver. It should be just 3 hours, the Goldilocks effect. So there it is, Casablanca down to Marrakesh. Interestingly, hold on to Ouarzazate as well. Marrakesh to Ouarzazate is another 4 hours because you're actually going through some of the Atlas Mountains, and that takes a much longer time. Hold on to this place, this weird place, Bouarfa. There is one Meshuggah who, it was me, who went there. I'm the only Westerner in the history of Moroccan civilization who visited Bouarfa for 12 minutes. And I'll show you a slide from there. But we'll get to Bouarfa when we get to there. It's really stark ravingly in the middle. I can't believe I said that, stark ravingly in the middle of nowhere, Morocco. Hold on to Oujda. It's really on the Moroccan-Algerian border. I'm going to show you some slides from there. And there's Fez, where 1492, remember that, crossing over the Strait of Gibraltar, and here's where the Sephardic Jews, the Jews from Spain, go. All right, my dears, everybody, so we've got that out of the way. Now, this is by far the coolest photograph that Temple Beth El will ever have on the Zoom screens this week. I have to tamp down my excitement, or maybe even for the month of March, I don't know. You and I are now on a flight. I'm, of course, sitting in the window seat because I want to take pictures, and you all are sitting next to me. That's quite a scene, I would imagine. But imagine that we're all sitting together. We're on the right side of the plane. We're going from Paris down to Casablanca. It's exactly a 3-hour flight. So we're heading south, and we're looking off to what? Well, look, here you have the tip of Spain in the photograph. And here you have the tip of Morocco. I mean, with my little rinky-dinky camera, I managed to get this all in one photograph. Here you have a place called Ceuta, which is a Spanish enclave on the Moroccan mainland. Look at the body, of course, you know, this is the Mediterranean and this is the Atlantic. This is only 8 miles from one continent to the other. And it was just freaky to me. Those are words we say in Manhattan. I don't know if you say things like that on the West Coast. It freaks me out every time I look at this photograph that everything is here. And here's Algeciras, the port city of Algeciras. You could take a ferry across to Tangiers, which is past our view. And if you look really carefully here, you can see the Rock of Gibraltar. I heard today that everybody on the Strait of Gibraltar has been vaccinated. So we should all, after the Zoom call, head over there for our vaccinations if you haven't already. So there we are, the Rock of Gibraltar. I find this haunting to be able to see all of that in one photograph. So there we are, dear folk. And now we've landed in Casablanca. That was a short flight. And being a good tour guide that I am, I've gone out and bought the paper for us, the French newspaper of the government. This is the official government of Morocco newspaper. They have the version in Arabic. We don't have to look at that. We bought the French version. And every time I see this, it's just so exhilarating. Look at the masthead. Again, the official government newspaper of Morocco. Here you have the date in, of course, French. Here you have the Islamic date. Here you have the Berber Amazigh date. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And look, the Jewish date. And they, of course, keep everything up to date on a daily basis. What other country in the world? I mean, the New York Times doesn't do this. They're not going to put the 4th of Heshvan on the New York Times, but Morocco does.
Right, can I ask a question? Is the Hebrew date a result of the recent accords, or have they been doing that for a long time?
This was 2013.
Oh yeah, you're right. I see the date now. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how, it's a good question. I don't know how long they've been doing this. But, you know, they've had unofficial relations with Israel for, I don't know, 3-4 decades. It's just now it's come a little bit more out in the open. And let me go off script a little bit. I get so excited about this, I have to go off script. Just a few weeks ago, you may know this already, the Moroccan government said, from now on, all of the school children in Morocco are going to have a couple of units in grade school learning about Moroccan Jewish life, because to be a Moroccan means to know about our Jewish heritage. What a great place. So for those, most of us, I guess, who haven't been to Morocco, some just pictures I've taken over the years. I've been to Morocco probably, I think now about 100 times over the last 43 years. Before all of this, it was 3 or 4 times a year now. There's not much to like about a pandemic, but that we can get together, you and I, like this. And that I get to meet you and hear that you were born in Germany and you grew up a little bit in Italy and in France. I find that breathtaking, to learn these things about people around the Zoom screen and to be able to share my love of Morocco with you. Don't get too excited. There are only 2 camels in Morocco. This is one of them. So there you are. And that's the other. Just so you get your full tuition money out of this trip to Morocco, this is in Bouarfa. And you're going to say, Meshuggah, what were you doing in Bouarfa? It's in the middle of nowhere. Well, I would take the bus, the local mail bus, from stop to stop back in the day when I was a graduate student. And I'd be looking for Jews, small pockets of Jews wherever I went. And so I'd approach the first person that looked half friendly and say, are there any Jews here? And usually they would say, no. And then, I'd wait 3 hours for the next bus and go to the next stop. And in some cases, I would find Jews where people thought there weren't any. It was really quite a fun thing to do. Some more just general pictures. I want to give you a visual look at how Morocco looks. Understand, here I am playing professor again, that in the larger cities in Morocco, there are 3 different neighborhoods. There's the Medina, which is the old Arab quarter. There is the Melah. You don't have to unmute yourselves, but could I watch your lips? I'm going to be watching your lips. Could you all repeat after me, please? Melah. Okay, I'm seeing you do that. Good. All right, Rabbi Singer, you've got a good group here. Well, Melah is distinctly related to the Hebrew word melach, not melech, but melach, which probably a lot of you know means salt. So now you're asking, well, why is the first Jewish ghetto built in 1438 in Fez called Melach? What's the connection with salt? Two explanations are in the history books, and no one knows if either is the right answer. One is that the first Melach, again, 15th century in Fez, was built over a bed of salt. And the second theory is that the Jews in the 15th century in Fez had the dubious distinction of having to salt the heads of decapitated criminals. There you go. Sorry, it's dinner time in California. I just have to tell you the way it is. And then, you know, Morocco was a French protectorate between 1912 to 1956. So lots of people speak French, some not very well, but most people speak French. So that section of town that the French built in the larger cities is called Ville Nouvelle. It's the new French Quarter. Once those quarters were built, a lot of Jews in those cities said, we're out of here. We're moving out of the Melach into the Ville Nouvelle. And that's the case to this day. Before you and I had smartphones, all the guidebooks, do you remember those things? Those so analog 20th century thing called guidebooks said, when you go to Fez and you go to this place, the Medina of Fez, make sure you hire yourself a local guide, because if you don't, no one will ever hear from you again. And you might as well just, you know, up and marry somebody local because you'll never find your way out otherwise. So trust me on this. That's how we operate. This is literally Casa Blanca. It's the White House. It's where most of the Jews, most of the time, have always been in Moroccan history. I took this picture back around 1980 from the top floor of the skyscraper in Casablanca at the time, 14th floor. It was a secret office. No one was supposed to know about it. It was the office of the Jewish Agency. And at the time, they were ferreting Jews out from Morocco to Israel. So how did middlemen, that's me, know about it? Well, I had friends who had friends, and they said, just remember the password, say the password. It was something like 2675 Central Avenue or something like that. Knock on the door and say that, and people will let you in. And that's how I got to take this picture. I lived with a Moroccan family, Moroccan Jewish family, for a couple of months every year for about 7 years. So I'm taking this picture from their balcony. It's in a really residential neighborhood in Casablanca, actually not a great one. They just opened their house to me, their home, their apartment. There, 7 of them, one of me. As you can tell, I don't eat all that much. So it was okay. And after a while, we got to be so close that I could walk around their apartment all day long taking pictures, and it didn't bother them. So I'm going to show you some rather intimate pictures of Moroccan Jewish daily life in just a minute. Here's the Mellah of Fez. You can tell that since it was built around 1438, doesn't look like much has ever been renovated. So there, and it's really kept its soul over all this time. This is the Mellah of Marrakesh. I lived on this street with a Jewish family that had 14 kids, plus me. So 14 and a half, if you will. It took me 3 years to meet all of the family because some of the kids were in France, some of the kids were in Israel. And every time I would come back, they would rotate. They would be coming home from here or there, and I'd meet another 3 of them. And they'd say, "Oh, you're the guy from New York. We've heard about you." More pictures of just general scenes of how Morocco looks. This is part of our little time together this afternoon, evening. I guess it's evening everywhere between us. I call it Project Runway, Moroccan style, what people do with their heads. Um, so more head stuff. At any time, dear folks, you see this red clay wall, you know that we've landed in Marrakesh. Marrakesh is the red clay city. Where are we? You've got it. We're back in Marrakesh. This is in the deep south, pretty much bordering the Sahara Desert. I have no idea what these women are doing or what they're wearing, but I like the fashion statement. This guy also. This guy on the left, we don't have time to talk about him, but he insisted on being my host to breakfast in the middle of nowhere, Morocco, on a 13-hour bus ride between, I was going to say New York to Oujda, between Casablanca to Oujda. And when a guy who looks like that tells you that you're eating, you eat. You see, I've learned survival skills on the subway system in New York City all of these years. It hasn't been for naught. And I took that talent and brought it with me to Morocco. You know, this is in Marrakesh because of the wall in front of us. I am sitting on the stoop of Ishu's store. Ishu was my father in Marrakesh. He's the one with the 14 kids. He and Esther are the ones with the 14 kids in this house in the Mellah. And so his store is about a 5-minute walk outside the walls of the Mellah. And I'm sitting one summer day with my telephoto lens, taking all of these pictures. And at the end of the day, I'll never forget this. Ishu says to me, you know, you can't be doing this anymore. It's dangerous. And I'm looking at him and I'm saying, what's so dangerous about this? He said, the whole neighborhood is talking about you. And I'm thinking, me? Why? And he said, they all think you're a Mossad agent. I said, okay, camera's back in the bag. No more pictures for the rest of my life until I leave here tomorrow. And so that's what happened. Berber girls, just beautiful, gorgeous Berber girls in the mountains of Morocco, which leads you, I know, because I know you all so well already, you're going to ask the next question, well, who are Berbers? So there are 3 population groups in Morocco. You have your Berbers, otherwise more properly referred to these years as Amazigh. You saw the Amazigh date on a newspaper. Next, cozied up to the Hebrew date, just to the right of it. The next folk to come are the Jews. So the Berbers are the first indigenous population in Morocco, yay, followed by the Jews. We kind of know or don't know when them folk arrived, followed next by the Arabs. Pretty cool. I am standing, this is from the Department of Too Much Information. I am standing in my underwear on the top of a rooftop of a Muslim family taking this picture. And you're asking me why? Well, they befriended me, I befriended them. I met them on a bus, a long trip. And they said, come visit us sometime. So a year later, I stayed with them for like a few days. And Jamila, their daughter, I think their youngest daughter here in the photograph, is taking care of bathing her brother and said to me just a minute before this photograph, your jeans are filthy. Take them off. I'm going to wash them. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is an interesting anthropological experience. If you talk about participant observation, this is the ultimate. So I'm taking this picture while my jeans are raining water behind me. What I do remember about this is my jeans went from completely wet to completely dry in 1 hour flat, which is more than any dryer I have seen in the United States. So the Moroccan sun, keep that in mind for technology. You know, this is back in Marrakesh, more kids. Add 40 years to each of these kids, everything running well. They must be grandparents by now, if it's Morocco. I mean, that's pretty freaky, or at least older parents. Ah, there was a famous anthropologist named Clifford Geertz from Princeton University, who back in the 70s and 80s was really intensively studying Morocco. And he famously said that Morocco is like a man sitting on a plane with a glass of gin in one hand and a copy of the Quran in the other. Imagine that for a moment. I mean, that's just like, ay Dios mío, that's crazy. Mon Dieu, c'est incroyable. So this was my way of saying, yeah, Morocco really has one foot in the left, one foot in the west, and one foot in the east. I lived for moments like this with my camera, to just walk around and see these beautiful moments of what I assume is a granddaughter holding hands with her grandfather, walking down the street and disappearing around a corner. This is in a place called Essaouira. I have to tell you, sorry, no escape. I'll tell you the story anyway, but I have to tell you the story. I am on the street corner in Casablanca during the holy month of Ramadan. And I see all of these women, these Muslim women in farajia and jalaba, flailing by with their beautiful garments on mopeds. And I'm thinking, you don't see this in Manhattan. This is, or I assume anywhere else for that matter, except in Morocco or North Africa. But I could never get the picture. They'd fly by too fast. And I'd always do a facepalm and say, I missed it again. Well, these two, it's like this happened yesterday. I remember this so clearly. They flew past me and they went a block away and they stopped for a minute. And I'm thinking, well, that's interesting. They just stopped. And then they made a U-turn and they came back and parked right in front of me. They came from a block away and they parked right in front of me. And I took that as a sign that it was okay to take their picture because they're smiling at me and they see I have my camera. So I take the picture, even though they're not at 40 miles an hour flailing by. Okay, I take their picture. And I figure, well, that was nice. But then something very, very strange happened. You see, the mother who's on the back of the bike gets off of the bike. And she says to me, get on the bike with my daughter. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. I'm a guy. It's Ramadan. I'm obviously not Muslim. I'm not even Moroccan. That's all obvious. As my students would say, what up? Like, why would the mother do this? And I'm looking at them for a very awkward moment. And I come to the conclusion that they're good, that they're kosher. So the mother gets off the bike. I get on the bike. You remember, I understand I have a big camera bag on my shoulder and I don't know where to hold on because I can't hold on to the daughter. So I'm holding on underneath the seat. It's a flimsy little piece of aluminum. I've never done this in my life before since been on a moped or a motorcycle. I'm just a low key kind of guy. The worst drug I've done in my life was an espresso in a cafe in Budapest, but that's another slideshow. And so the daughter who's on the front of the moped starts whizzing through and swerving through Casablanca traffic like this, swerving through. I'm thinking, I'm having a near-death experience. I'm never going to meet Rabbi Singer. Not now, not 40 years from now. It's just not going to happen. And we drive about 10 minutes. I mean, we're sailing around Casablanca. We go down to the beach. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, Middleman, you really dug yourself in deep this time. But at least I don't have to finish graduate school. It was getting to be a lot of work. So, you know. And then the daughter gets off the moped and says, we're going inside that house. And I'm thinking, last chance. I can cut and run for it, or I could go inside. Now, if this were a fiction workshop, I'd say to you guys as my class, okay, finish off the short story. Tell me what happens. But this was real. So I'm thinking, I got to be polite. I go in the house with them. And the father of the family is there, all of her siblings, are there. They say, it's okay, sit down. The mother comes up like a half hour later and comes in the house, and suddenly everything becomes clear. They say to me, you know, we saw you standing there alone on the street corner. We know it's Ramadan. All the cafes are closed. All the restaurants are closed. And you look hungry. We want to feed you. Now, by the way, this has been a recurrent lifestyle of mine my entire life. People stop and stare at me on the street. People reach through Zoom windows and say, please have something. We need to feed you. Though none of you have offered anything yet tonight, but okay.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Are you speaking French all the time to them?
With them particularly, yes. Yeah,
Okay,
because
thank you.
my Moroccan Arabic is bad now, and it was worser back then. It was worse now, and it was worser back then.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. This is Morocco. It's just where people will pick. I don't think this happens very often, but it was just such an incredible experience. This is the Morocco I know and love. Now, here we are, first day in Casablanca. I go inside. This store still exists, but it's now called King Chicken or Chicken King or something like that. Same location. It's no longer kosher because there aren't many Jews left to make a living, to go in and buy stuff. So I go inside the store and I say to the guy behind the counter, where are the Jews? I don't know what language I spoke to him in. It was either Hebrew or in French. My hunch is I spoke to him in Hebrew. And he takes me out of the store and he's pointing over this way to my left. And he says, you see that street right down there to your left, to our left? Just go down there. There are 7 synagogues. This is 1978. Those 7 synagogues are still there today. And he said, go sit in any of those synagogues. It's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon and you'll find Jews. So I go sit in one of these synagogues, first one I can find. I'm the only guy in there. Now, I'm not like a big fan of mincha, but I figured, okay, if this is my way of my entry into the Jewish community, I'll do mincha. So 10 minutes later, a guy in the whole synagogue, a guy comes in and sits down next to me. He takes one look at me and he says, Hashuma. And I'm thinking to myself, either he sneezed or he's speaking Moroccan Arabic. Let me assume it's the latter, plan B. So I responded to him in Hebrew, which is always a good thing to do when you're in a synagogue and you think you're in trouble. And I said to him, I'm sorry, but I don't speak Moroccan Arabic. And he said, oh, okay. What you're doing is shameful. And I'm thinking, boy, this isn't going so well. I said, well, I almost turned Brooklynite at that point. I said, I wanted to say, you talking to me? Like, what am I doing? And he said, you're sitting in our synagogue as if you're in a cafe. You got to put both feet on the ground. So from that point on, for the last 43 years, anytime I go into a synagogue, both feet are on the ground. So don't have to remind me, next time I'm in Temple Bethel, both of my feet will be firmly placed on ground. I wanted to draw a diagram of this experience. This is a true to life illustration of how I look, no better than I do on the Zoom screen. There I am. And excuse the inartistry of this, but I just wanted to draw a big blob. I'm in this big blob now, 1978, July, of Moroccan Jewish life. I don't know what I was doing, but the great, fantastic learning curve was every time I had a Hashuma moment, I would bump up against a different border of Moroccan Jewish life. And it was very instructive. And that's how I got in large part to write my dissertation about the contours and fissures and the borders and mores of the Moroccan Jewish communities. It was a very good, powerful learning experience. People would say, you're an idiot, but you're our idiot. So it's okay. We still love you. Some pictures of Jews. Et alors, enfin, après un demi-heure, les photos des Juifs marocains. Sorry, when I get excited, I just start talking the language I know and I semi-know and but much love. This is the phenotype, the spectrum. The girl with the freckles and red hair on the left. The girl on the right could be, the young woman on the right could be from Guyana for all we know, both Moroccan Jews. One of the 14 kids I stayed with in Ishu and Esther's home. We're back in Marrakesh. You can tell that for sure. This is also in Marrakesh, one of the 14 kids. Simon, one of the 40 beautiful Jewesses left in Oujda on the Moroccan-Algerian border. Soon after I took this picture, she left. This must be 38 years ago or so. Last time I heard, she had 5 kids, they must be in their 30s now. Here's Esther, mother of 14 and a half kids, if you want to count me in the bunch. Here she is making breakfast biscuits. She knew I would be hungry the next morning. There's her son, Isaac, who lives down the street from her in Israel now. And last time I checked, he was a vegetable fruit merchant. So there he is. Here's Eli, the youngest of the 14 kids. He went off to B'nai Brak and became a bit of a rabbinic scholar, I think. Who is this? Speak up quickly. Who is this?
You.
It's you.
Yeah, you in the 1970s.
That took much too long for each of you to say. You had to answer right away and say, obviously that's you, and nothing has changed in 43 years, obviously. But you had to take your time, you had to look, but okay.
No, we had to unmute ourselves.
That was, Sandra, that was very smooth. I'll accept that as for partial credit. Okay, we'll let you go this time. Well done. So remember I said we're going to walk across the field in Ouarzazate and enter that Kasbah and see how Jews lived until 1967. We open the door and you see the tea kettle that they left. They must have been in a hurry to leave. And you're asking, well, why did Jews leave? Well, before 1948, there were probably as many as 275, 280,000 Jews in Morocco. There's probably 1,000 left now. That's not publishable figures. I know I'm really close, lifelong friends with a woman who does the counting these days. So that's pretty accurate. So we've gone from 275, 280,000 Jews down to about 1,000 Jews. Why did they leave when Israel was established? A lot of them thought the Messiah was about to come. And they said, we want to be at the address to see the Messiah when he arrives. So a lot of people left then. Anytime there's a conflagration in the Middle East, or back in the day when there was, the Suez Canal crisis, 1967, 1973, Jews will leave. When Mohammed V, King of Morocco, passed away in 1961, a lot of Jews said, oh no, we don't know what his son is going to be like. A lot of Jews left. His son was also, may peace be upon both of them. Hassan II was very good to the Jews as well, as is the current king, Mohammed VI. Remember, Morocco was a French protectorate between 1912 and 1956. So when the French left, a lot of Jews said, we don't know what it's going to be like living without the French here. A lot of Jews left then. So there've been major waves. Now you're going to ask, well, why did Jews leave now? Glad you were thinking of asking, because I did a survey a few years ago of the 42 high school seniors, all of them, 100% of them, who were Jewish high school seniors who were studying for the French baccalaureate exam. And as everyone knows, they all said, when we graduate, we leave. And so I asked them, well, why are you going to leave? And they gave 3 reasons. 1, there are no jobs for us here in Morocco. 2, there's no higher education for us here in Morocco. And 3, there's no one for us to date and to marry here in Morocco. And so then the next question on the questionnaire I asked them was, so where do you want to go? What's your priority? First choice is always France. Second choice, as I recall, was Montreal, And the third choice was Israel. I thought that was interesting that Israel was the third choice. We are,
Can I ask you a question before you go on?
yeah,
So in 1948, apparently Jews in a lot of the Arab countries were either really persecuted or kicked out. So was it different in Morocco at that point?
no, there was blood in the streets.
So they were persecuted, right?
Yeah, I don't like using that term
Or,
often, but that is what it was.
okay,
That is one of those times when we can use that word. Is there were deaths in the street. There are graveyards filled with people who were persecuted and who died back then. I want to put this in perspective, though, and say that um, the government of Morocco has always been very protective of the Jewish community. So when the Nazis came to Mohammed V during the war and said, hand us over your 250,000 Jews, he said, over my dead body, you will do that. Get out of here. And the Germans left. He stood up to them. There's a little bit more to the story than that, but yeah. So in the streets, there are issues, but the government as a whole has by and large been an amazing protector of the Jewish community. I think we all should get together, all of us around the Zoom screen, and do a timeshare. Voila. Now I'm your real estate agent. Oh, this is a typical architecture in the Melah or Medina of either neighborhood of Marrakesh. So you see, if you look up, it's an open air courtyard, which is great unless it rains, but it doesn't rain that often in Marrakesh. And then you can have your tea outside. You could have your lunch and dinner inside if you like. And upstairs, you see my pointer, I hope. You can have your more private bedroom for you and your guests. That field that you and I just crossed a few minutes ago to the Kasbah, back when I took that picture, had two Jews, Meir and Azar. Here's one of them. I forget which one that is. This is either Meir or Azar. They've long since passed away. There were two Jews left, and here he is inviting me for tea in his house. Some scenes of Rabbi Singer, before I go any further, I want to time myself. Do we have exactly an hour, or can we go over a little bit?
you can go over.
Okay, good, because I'm having fun and I hope you are too, but I don't want to rush through.
No, we are.
Okay, I want to make sure that I don't rush too much to be exactly on time. It's such an un-Jewish thing to do, to be exactly on time anyway.
Exactly.
You know, in Morocco, people would say, come to our wedding. It's at 7 o'clock in the evening, Thursday night. And like an idiot for years, I would show up at 6:45 to make sure I was there on time for 7 p.m. I never got the learning curve for this. And without fail, the band, the band or whatever you want to call them, the musicians would show up at 9:30 and take out their instruments around 10 o'clock. And the first guests would come around 10:30. I just could never get used to that. Anyway, thank you for letting me share that. I feel better. All right. Some more pictures of insides of Jewish homes. This is in Oujda, again, on the Algerian border. You see here the box of Tide, the ubiquitous box of Tide. The more things change, the more we always will find Tide detergent. That was in Oujda. Here's Rabat, and Rabat, the capital. These were the last two Jews of Tiznit. Again, I took this picture really almost 40 years ago. So I had heard, I was in Casablanca at the time, I heard that they were there. It's a 14-hour bus ride way down in the south, on the coast, Atlantica, but way down in the south to see them. So I went down there, took their pictures, stayed with them 10 minutes, and then took another 14 hours back up north. I took basically 30 hours to take this picture. So enjoy it, because it took me, I slaved over a hot stove all night making this picture. So something like that. I don't know. All right. These are 4 of the last 9 Jews in Debdu. It's a little village, which at one point was half Jewish, half not. I stayed with him for dinner. We sat around having dinner, all 9 of us, 10 of us, 9 of them and 1 of me. And then I stayed overnight. It was just this unforgettable experience. This guy on the right, this is back in Casablanca. The guy on the right, this is with the family that I told you about. 7 of them and 1 of me. The guy on the right was Morris. He was an electrician, and stayed with him for years and years and years, months at a time. And then one day I'm back in New York in my office at City College, and I'm reading something that's coming in the mail for free, like the B'nai B'rith Monthly magazine or something like this. And I'm flipping through it, and there's a picture of Morris, and it says, Rabbi Morris Perez is the rabbi of congregation so-and-so in like Belfast. And I'm thinking, how did that happen? And then a few years later, what happened? You see, when I get excited, I lose my testosterone, and my voice register goes up 14 notches. The next thing that happens is he goes to an Orthodox seminary in London, and then goes up to Nottingham, England, Nottingham, and becomes the rabbi of Nottingham Hebrew congregation for 25 years. He was an electrician in Morocco when I knew him, and that's what he did. So if you ever know what future Moroccan rabbis, how they blow dry their hair, don't say I never showed you that slide. So there it is. No complaints, please. You've seen it. Mon Dieu. All right, next slide. This is their father, who became like my father in Casablanca. Just this holy, special man from a place called Taznacht in the desert. Spoke Berber, one of the dialects of Berber, fluently. These are 2 of his daughters. You see, this is in the living room, and at night, the living room cushions become beds, and during the day, it's a cushion. Here is around 8 o'clock in the morning with one of their other daughters before, obviously, she got up. This is back in Marrakesh there's Esther of breakfast biscuit manufacturing fame that you saw a few minutes ago. This should be Italy, like that Mamma Mia kind of look. But of course, it's Passover. I don't know who the interior designer was of this house. It looks a little busy to me, but somehow it all, Moroccan style, it all comes together. I got locked into the cemetery of Fez with this guy. The cemetery of Fez has these huge walls all around it with barbed wire on top of that, because they're afraid people are going to either leave or come in. I don't know, one or the other. So the guardian of the cemetery decided to go on a three-hour siesta. I thought I was never going to be able to leave this place, so I spent my time taking pictures of the other Jewish guy in the cemetery. Jewish schoolhouse in Casablanca. I lived for these moments. This is a Jewish schoolhouse in Marrakesh. With my camera, I was always looking for these moments of time in Jewish Morocco that punctured time itself and just entered this other very quiet, timeless realm. And if I could possibly capture that on film, I thought I had a good day with the camera. I believe that this is one of those moments where just everything came together. And you have that, for me, part of the essence of Moroccan Jewish life on film. If anyone needs proof that women are smarter than men, go no further than this. I can say goodnight now and we'll all be happy. I caught that on film as well. They're saying, obviously, or not obviously, they're saying the Shema. But there's always one girl who say, please, what are you doing with that camera? And no matter where you go in the world, that I get somebody who reveals my intent. I can't pose any photographs. This could be anywhere, any Jewish kid or any kid in the world. I got lucky. Um, I asked another group a couple of weeks ago, who can come up with the best caption for this photograph? And some guy said, that's obviously early COVID testing in 1982. I thought that was a rather clever answer. So on your own, you can come up with your own caption for this. Jewish spice merchant in the Melach of Marrakesh, hardware store owner, Erfurt in the deep, that's not his name. His name is Meir. He's a cordonnier, shoemaker. Sometimes I'd like to pretend that French is my first language and English is my second. Don't listen to me. He's a shoemaker. His name is Meir, and there were 9 Jews left in Morocco, in Erfurt. When I took this picture, they all left for Israel. There's Ishu on the left. And here is the stoop that I was sitting on where I almost got into Mossad agent trouble. I was sitting right there. But there's Ishu, just a wholly special man. He and everyone must have picked up and left for Morocco, for Israel, maybe 25, 30 years ago. And I think he must be gone from us maybe 20 years or so now. Here he is inside of the store. I didn't realize it until a couple of years into my friendship with him, but he was a Moroccan Jewish folk doctor. Never heard of this before, but he had this booklet, quite a loose leaf. This adds new meaning to the term loose leaf, book of old Moroccan Jewish formulas, medicinal prescriptions. And Muslims would line around the block, literally around the corner, looking for his help. And he'd be writing out amulets here. And that's how I gather how he really made his living. A Hilula is the pilgrimage to the tomb of a sainted rabbi on the anniversary of usually his death. Usually it wasn't to her, but in this case, his death. Just some quick pictures of what a Hilula looks like. It's also an excuse not only to ask for intercession, to ask the sainted rabbi. You see, Jews do have saints. In Morocco, there are saints. It's also an occasion to get together with all your friends, Jewish friends across Morocco, and have a picnic for a week. Here is lighting candles at the tomb of a sainted rabbi up in Wezn in the north, late at night. The guy on the right is Albert Suissa. He was a famous Moroccan Jewish singer. Obviously, you know what this is, a circumcision. This kid does it for me here. He's kind of like saying, oh, I remember after years of therapy what this was like, and I'd like to forget it. So, all right. One of the last 3 Jews of Demnat, his 2 daughters were the other 2 Jews. His wish was to be buried in Demnat. It's about an hour and a half or so outside of Marrakesh. And I believe that's what happened. His 2 daughters were in their 20s and they said, we will honor his wishes and then we will leave Demnat and Morocco. Scenes from synagogues. This is, for me, one of those other timeless moments in Morocco, in a synagogue, just that punctures time itself and enters a whole nother holy realm. I believe for me, this is another one of those moments. This is the synagogue in Oujda on the Algerian border. To the best of my knowledge, it's still there. When I took this picture, there were 40 Jews left in a synagogue that can hold 2,000 people. This is the women's gallery. You know, there's separate seating usually in the synagogues in Morocco. This is the women's gallery in a 200-year-old synagogue in the Mellah of Marrakesh. You know what this is. Of course, this is a wedding in Casablanca. I have to tell you the story. So there's this huge synagogue in the middle of Casablanca called Beit El. It was built in the it's also called, it's not the original Beit El. The original Beit El we know is it was where you guys go.
That's right.
This is the other Beit El. There are only 2 Beit Els. This is the other Beit El. It is huge. It is the largest synagogue in Morocco. You and I are now up in the women's gallery. So trust me on this. Way down here, there is seating for like 700 people down below. I mean, we're up in the balcony. And I used to go, and there's that organ isn't there anymore. But the organ was up there back then. This is like 1982, August. Because Cantor Azuelos, he was the cantor of the synagogue, Azuelos, Spanish name, would hold court every Sunday and do 2 or 3 weddings in a row. And I would sit up there and just listen to him because he had the most incredible voice. He also had a couple of quirks. One quirk is that he knew more Moroccan Jewish melodies than anyone else on the planet. And the other quirk was he said, no one is ever to record me and I'm going to die with all of this knowledge. And I thought to myself, oh my God, don't do that. I didn't know him, I never spoke to him, but something I realized, you know, being a New Yorker, I know no shame or fear, I should say, is right over here. You see where my pointer is, there's a cassette tape recorder. And this cassette, you know where this is going, nowhere good. There's a cassette tape recorder there. And it was hooked up by a wire, by a cable, all the way down to the front of the synagogue to the microphone where Azuelos would hold court and do his service. So one Sunday afternoon, with all of these people upstairs that were in on it with me, I put a cassette in the recorder, turned the cassette tape recorder on, and Azuelos starts singing the service. And it sounded something like this. Sabani Marana Berebotai Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Telling you this is gold. I'm taping him. By the way,
Was that you singing?
Yes, that was
Wow.
You
You
have
could be
a
a cantor.
that was me live from my living room on the Upper West Side.
Wow.
beautiful voice.
I know
Yeah.
I blew out all of your speakers, right? So
Taught you well.
That's
see Rabbi
wonderful.
Singer for reimbursement for your ear pods because I'm, you know, I have nothing to do with this. But yeah, no, that was me. Well, didn't you see my lips moving?
I wasn't sure if you were lip syncing or if it was really,
No, that was me.
wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So then he starts singing the second bracha, and he stops. He stops in the middle of the bracha. I'll never forget. There's like 500 people downstairs. It is huge, and he's wearing a long white kittel, and he looked like a French chef, a big white hat. And he goes running through the synagogue, and he starts heading up the staircase. You see right here, right down there is the staircase. He's heading up because he knows that's where the cassette tape recorder is. And I'm thinking to myself, near-death experience number 2. Yeah. So I take the cassette out, stick it in my jeans pocket, turn off the cassette tape, destroy all the evidence. I'm sitting down, I'm all feeling palsied. And all of these guys upstairs who are part of the Moroccan Jewish community, they're laughing. They're giggling about it because they're in on this too. And I'll never forget, he hovered over me. He bent over me. I could literally feel his breath on my back. And in French, he said to himself, "Oh my, I guess it's okay. No, it's okay. No one is taping me. It's okay. I can go back down and do the service notes. It's okay." My heart is pounding. He goes back downstairs. As he's heading down the staircase, I take out the cassette and put it back in the tape recorder. Rabbi Singer, I don't know whether this is ethical or not. You
Right.
can just slap me silly afterwards.
You're not making it to heaven.
Well, I knew that before the Zoom call, but this confirms it. What have I got to lose? I'll just make my dish rag out to you guys as a dish rag. I just tell you what happened. I recorded the rest of it and then spent a day when I was back, and I was living in Philadelphia at the time, in front of a piano, just transcribing this. So I could get it. So
Before you go forward, I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
yeah.
Okay, so you showed us a couple of synagogues in places where there's no Jew left. So is somebody taking care of the synagogue?
The Moroccan government is renovating a lot of synagogues that have been abandoned.
As museums or what?
Not so much as, there is a Jewish museum in Casablanca funded by the Moroccan government. So yes, the Moroccan government recently, by order of the king, said we're renovating them, and they did renovate the Melach of Marrakesh. I wish they hadn't, because I thought it looked better when it looked a little grimy and dusty. So give it 50 years and it'll be back the way it kind of looked before. But they're renovating the synagogue so that people can go in, not so much as a museum, but I guess it's kind of a living heritage of what Jewish life was. And they're renovating some of the cemeteries too. It's very touching to see the Moroccan government doing this. Please ask questions anytime you want.
I have another question.
Oh, please.
Which is, these pictures are absolutely spectacular. And have you published a book of these pictures?
No, I haven't. I've had an exhibit of these, solo exhibit at Beit HaTfutzot, the Museum of the Diaspora in Tel Aviv, and a whole bunch of other museums, mostly in Europe. And it was supposed to go last April with the big opening, Jewish Museum of Casablanca. But you know what happened with that. So that'll happen at some point. I'd love to do a book. So
it would make a beautiful book.
Anybody knows, also, if you want to see other photographs, I do photographs of Paris and New York, and it's on Instagram. So you guys can stalk me on Instagram if you want to see other stuff. Just some scenes of cemeteries around Morocco. Do I have about 7 minutes more? Could I, is that okay with everyone or not?
I mean, we often have an hour and a half, so don't worry about it.
Oh, I'm sorry, what was an hour and a half? We have an hour and a half?
If you wish to have an hour and a half, yes.
Great. That's the best news I've heard all evening. Okay, so this is a place called in Midelt, the cemetery of Midelt. It's about 1 kilometer outside of Midelt. No Jews left there anymore, not for a long time, as far as I know. And I thought, there's a tradition of placing a pebble, a rock, a shard of glass on the tombstone, tombstone that you're visiting. So I thought, I want to make this count. I want to find the soul that has been visited the least in this cemetery and leave my pebble there. So I walked around for maybe 20 minutes, half an hour. I found a little girl, this baby named Simone Kubi. She, if you look carefully, you can see it says February 1937 to August 1937, and the date and her name is inscribed obviously in the wet concrete. So I thought, if there is any soul that has not been visited much in this cemetery, it must be hers. I left the pebble there, took this picture, and said, everything running well, I will come back in 5 years on my own private Hilula again and meditate for a few moments at the spot. I did. I went back 5 years later and looked and looked and looked, couldn't find her tomb, and finally did, but saw something strange. Somebody had placed their own rock, much bigger than this one, where mine had been. And I thought, oh my God, somebody else has obviously visited this place, this tomb. Who could it possibly be over the last 5 years? And I said, everything running well, I'm coming back 5 years from now. And I didn't. And 10 years passed, and 15 years passed, and I didn't. And then about 7 or so years ago, I mean, this whole thing takes place over, like, believe it or not, over like 33 years. I took a few of my more advanced students on an advanced itinerary, not the usual itinerary. I take students to Morocco with me every semester when there isn't a pandemic. So I've done maybe 30 of these student trips. And for a couple of my more advanced students who've been to Morocco already, I take them back on a trip through a more advanced trip. And we went here as part of that itinerary. And that first group back, we looked and looked and looked, all 6 of us. And we couldn't find her tomb. It was crazy, but we couldn't find it. Oh my God, I've lost another few years. And then like 3 years later, I took another group of students back. This is about 4 years ago. And I forget the timeline now, but it's been over like three and a half decades. And we found her tombstone again. But strangely, it had been renovated. The guardian of the cemetery had decided to patch things up. So I thought it would be fun, dear ones, I want to do another screen share of something rather different. So give me a second. If I manage to get off the Zoom call, don't take it personally. I'll come and find you. I'll come and fetch you again. I'll get right back on. But I want to do a screen share of, here it is. Yay. Okay. Let me bring this up. And I gather if I hit the little green thing, it'll look even better. Can you all see Shalom Aleichem?
Yes.
You can all see that okay? All right. Well, you know, on Friday night, folk all over the world sing Shalom Aleichem. I don't know what melody you use at Beit El, but here it's something like Shalom Aleichem Malachei Hasharet. You all know that melody, right?
Correct.
Na, 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 na. That actually was written by a guy named, I think his name was Goldfarb, about 100 years ago. It did not come from Sinai. It was not revealed on Sinai. It was actually a human being that made that one up. But on Friday night in Casablanca and Marrakesh, there's a really beautiful melody that I'd like to teach you folk. This could be really fun, or it'll probably be disaster. I did this with my Jews of Morocco class in the fall, and I had all of them unmute themselves. They're a brilliant group. We were, of course, on Zoom. I had them unmute themselves, and I put these words up, of course. And brilliant group, but they couldn't carry a tune for anything. It's just amazing that they didn't take the Zoom license away from the university after that. So what I thought might be fun is, with Rabbi Singer's permission, let's have you all unmute yourselves. Or if you're not comfortable, you don't have to. But it would be so great, so much fun if many of you did unmute yourselves. And I'd like you to just stumble along with me. Stumbling along with me means I'm going to just start singing this. And I want you just start singing along with me, even though you don't know the melody, and you will get there. Magically, you will get there. And we'll do we're going to do the first 2 verses, stanzas, in other words, the first 4 lines. Are you all ready? Have a little bit of fun.
Sure.
All right. Okay. I see people drinking water. That was a good idea. Here we go.
Just the light.
Here we go. Shalom Aleichem
Malachei Hasharet Malachei
Hasharet Malachei Elyon Mi Melech Malachei Malachim. Now it gets complicated. Kadosh Baruch Hu. How did you do that time? Maybe we should do it a little bit lower. Maybe we should do it there. Ready? Here we go. Boachem Leshem
Malakeha
Shalom. Malakeha Shalom. Malakeha
Shalom.
Mi Melech Malkeha
Akim
Kadosh
Oh.
Baruch Hu. You were better than my students. Good people. What reactions, questions? You all want to leave and go do what you were doing before I barged in on your living rooms? Anything you'd like to do?
I want to tell you, thank you so much. It was really interesting.
Yes.
Really enjoyed the whole presentation. Got so much
It
out of
was
it.
fun.
Makes me want to go there.
For you, special tour, no problem.
Yeah, we're going to come with your students next time.
Yeah.
Gary, did you hear me?
Who said what? I'm sorry.
I traveled with Sherry Bachman and I don't see, she's on this call, so.
Oh dear, something is
Weird.
a lot of noise. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I had one.
Go ahead.
I wanted to know what precipitated, if any, one thing, the interest in rejuvenating the buildings and to upkeep the cemetery. What prompted that when in fact there don't seem to be any Jews present any longer? Where did it come from? Why did it come?
Depends on who you ask. I know my interpretation of this, is it Martha?
Yes,
May I call you Martha? It's okay.
of course. Yes.
Is that you're dealing with enlightened people. Look, in the second paragraph, I sound like such a professor. In the second paragraph of the introduction to the new Constitution of Morocco, written in 2011, it says that our country is suffused with Islamic teaching, but part of our identity is several other cultures that are mixed in, including the Hebraic one. So there you have in the second paragraph, the preamble of the Moroccan Constitution, the statement that says to really know Morocco is to know our Jewish heritage.
Wow.
So it makes sense that they would want to, take care of the synagogues. It's also, I think, one of the side effects of all that is that it's good business. I mean, there are 40,000 Moroccan Israelis or just plain old Israelis that go to Morocco every year. And so they see, it's just so touching for them to be able to walk into a synagogue that may not be used anymore, but it's still being cared by the Moroccan government. It's a good thing to do.
Oh yeah, good PR.
It's good PR, but I don't think that's why they do it. I think the primary, maybe that's part of it, but I think the real reason is you're dealing with people that really have a higher level of consciousness of how important the Jewish community has been and is in Moroccan life. So I find Morocco to be a really a beacon, a model of how different religions can get along with one another. Is there anti-Semitism in Morocco? You bet there is. And I've spent a chunk of time, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, during doing survey research. I'm the only guy I think that's doing sociological survey research on the ground in Casablanca and Marrakesh. 1,400 actually Muslims that finished this a few years ago about how they really feel about Jews in their midst. And it's, I've got data that no one else has, and it's really, really spine-tinglingly, if that's a word, interesting, I think, exciting.
What is their political disposition toward Israel?
I think Morocco is not a homogeneous population. It never has been. It's really split up into all of these different regions. Some of them don't get along with each other. The Sultan, I'm really taking a while to answer this, Martha. The Sultan back in the day, 50, 60, 100, 200 years ago, used to go on tours throughout Morocco just to say, hey, this is my territory. You are my people, just to, to try to hold together these disparate parts of the population. So I think, the headline about answering Muslim-Jewish relations is it depends on the decade and it depends on the location. And in this case, today, 2021, it's really the population group. Are you Berber? Are you Arab? Are you younger? Are you older? Are you man or are you woman? All of these, I mean, I've been looking at all of that and it's peeling away the different layers. It's complicated and a lot of fun.
Well, I want to thank you. Anybody have any other questions before we?
Yeah,
Joan?
the first thing that came to my mind when you said that melach came from melach was my mother koshering meat in the bathtub with salt. And I'm just wondering if maybe that was the origin of the salt connection with Jews.
The historians, to the best of my knowledge, have not offered that as a hypothesis, but I would call it the Jonian hypothesis now, and we could add it to the historical record, make it official. I don't know your last name, so I had to say the Jonian, but it could make sense, but I'm not sure the people that labeled it the Melach had that much of an interior knowledge of what Jewish ritual was. Maybe they did. It's an interesting idea, isn't it, Joan? Were you one of those that had around the Zoom screen that had been to Morocco? I don't remember. Yes, you did say yes. Yeah, few of you have.
Judy, did you have a question?
I have a question.
Okay, but Judy, did you raise your hand? Okay, I guess not. All right, go ahead, Susie.
I've heard some French Jews call Jews from Morocco, Algeria, pieds noirs. Not a very nice thing to hear.
I haven't heard that from Jew to Jew. Of course, we have heard that, in France about French folk who were in Algeria and then came back to the mainland. But I haven't heard that as an intra-Jewish term. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just for those who don't know French, pieds noirs means black feet. So it's definitely not it's a pejorative term, definitely. It could be the snobs in France calling people from Africa less than. I mean, I have a French mother too, so I feel like I could say that. Any other questions before we? Okay, well, I really want to thank you for a very, very delightful presentation and very engaging. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
My pleasure. All of you stay safe and well, and I'm so happy to meet you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and we're coming to Morocco with you when the pandemic is over.
Right.
So get ready for a troop of 19 people coming with you.
I will actually look forward to that, and we'll eat well together. I know some good restaurants. I'm going to leave you first in case you all, as a learning community, I know you all know one another, so I will butt out as the foreigner, so you can all be together without me. Have a good night, folk. Be well.
Thank you so much. Thank
Be
you.
well.